Hello friends, Jenkins Dota here, bringing you another Dota 2 video on behalf of Pvgna.com, and this is part of the General Concepts video series. And in this video I'm going to be discussing the do's and don'ts of properly high grounding. And first and foremost, I want to discuss what is actually so difficult about high grounding. And I say that I'm actually here in a replay between LGD and Newbie. This was part of the Mars Dota 2 League finals. And so obviously lots of money being played for here, very, very good players and good teams. However, what I'm about to show you, this replay is actually a botched high ground attempt. And this is a game state where Tide has Blink Ravage, the Chaos Knight has a BKB, he's very, very huge, he has his Phantasm up, Storm, 19 Bloodstone charges, absolutely stomping tremendously here. So this is a game state where LGD, with their 4K gold lead, actually closer to 5K, I believe, they're very, very happy with the state of the game, and they've decided they can go high ground. And I actually do agree that given the enemy heroes and given their heroes, if they execute this fight correctly, they can go high ground. However, they don't. And why didn't they do that? And that's because high grounding is so damn difficult. It's always been hard, but it was made a lot harder with these shrines being added into the game. It actually got a little bit nerfed recently, which is good because it was way too hard before. But let's discuss first, why is high grounding actually so difficult? So basically the concept of high grounding is just transitioning the game from a phase where you're killing people and ganking and doing stuff in the jungles and doing stuff outside of the base to a phase of the game where you are forcing them to 5-man into you because you're 5-manning into their base. And nobody ever sacrifices a Rax like they do with towers or Roshan or anything like that. The Rax are there; those are not the same as any of those other objectives. It's so game losing to lose a Rax. So basically, you're transitioning to a phase of the game where you're going to fight the enemy team. So you better be damn sure that you can do it if you try to go high ground. So basically, it's a big positioning fight. It's big into, you know, trying to have good vision and really you have to make sure that you don't screw up the team fight, because all of the odds are stacked against you. And I will show you how LGD kind of screws this one up. So actually the positioning right now that they have is pretty decent. You'll see soon where it kind of screws up. I think that the supports are positioned in good places right now. You have this Earth Spirit who has his blink. He's ready to go in and fight with all of his abilities if he has to. You have this Ancient Apparition who is standing in the back. He has basically no items, but he's going to use his spells, and he's not going to be caught in the crossfire of any of the other heroes being focused. Really, the Earth Spirit is kind of acting as a hero who's going to save his team if somebody gets gone on. The Tide is putting himself in the front, and I actually agree with this. In some games, perhaps if there was a Tide counter, I would say don't do this because you're sacrificing potentially a Ravage in the team fight, which is really, really dumb. But with that being said, the team, all of Newbie's heroes, actually cannot deal with the Tide very well. He's going to crack and shell off any of the silences if you actually do try to focus him, and he's not going to die in a chrono. And if he does, if you just solo chrono him and you focus all your efforts on Tide, you're going to have to use all your abilities on the Tide. So in this game, his positioning is actually fine, but if he wasn't in a kind of a situation where he's super tanky, he would stand in the back as well with the supports because he wants to get that Ravage off if a fight does start, and his damage is negligible to the tower. Chaos Knight, his positioning perfectly fine right now. He needs to be the one hitting the tower. He has all of the tower DPS. Storm does a decent amount, but I think that the Storm is too important, and the game is too close for the Storm to actually be hitting this tower, and you're going to see where you know that comes into play. So I think that's the big issue, is that the Storm and the CK are standing really close together. I think that the Storm and the CK should be super far apart because they're dealing with a Chronosphere, they're dealing with a Puck Waning Rift and Dream Coil. So lots of AoE abilities, and basically the only way they can lose the team fight is if these two heroes get focused together, or if somehow they can get the you know, the Storm and basically if they can get the CK before his BKB plus either two of the other heroes or the Storm. That's going to win them the fight. So I will play it in regular speed and just show you what happens here. So you can see the CK actually he kind of second guesses his positioning and gets a little scared of the enemy team initiating, and he runs back into the Storm. And that's kind of the big issue here. Tide goes in and he gets a really good Ravage. AA does a decent blast. I think he hit the puck, but it doesn't matter because the damage is already done. The CK is dead before his BKB, and Storm basically has to run, and his team is just totally on the run now. Earth Spirit went in to try and save his team, and he just got blown up. So the issue kind of arises here. When you see that the CK second guesses what's going on when he sees that the enemy team is kind of trying to initiate, so he's like, okay guys, I'm going to back off, and I'm playing a little too aggressive. But he runs right into the Storm. And because the Storm was hitting the tower, and I honestly don't think it was necessary, they both get chronoed right now. And this is just a disaster situation. So lots of damage comes out. Puck hits a double orb. The Earth Spirit goes in to try and save his team, but the damage is already done. The CK's already dead. Storm's half HP. He's used half his mana. The Ravage was kind of wasted because the CK and the Storm were... Basically, 11 was forced to go for a Ravage to protect his heroes. Otherwise, the Storm would have died. So he wasted this Ravage because the Storm got caught in that chrono. So just the team fight just goes horribly because they didn't position correctly. They positioned bad. So once again, it might be their read of the game that they thought that it would have worked. They actually do end up winning this game, so it's very likely, and I know this has happened in my experience, that they perhaps had a different read of the game where they thought that basically anybody could get chronoed and be fine, and they wiped them anyway with like Ravage and stuff like that. But clearly after this, they were like, okay, you know, we're going to take a step back, we're going to reevaluate. And that's actually a very important thing for taking high ground. Sometimes you screwed up. Actually, I would say very frequently you screwed up because it's not an easy thing to do. This was a botched attempt, and next I'll get into a replay where they actually do it correctly. So in this clip, we essentially have the exact same game. It's just later in the game where LGD has clearly reevaluated, which is something that you should do if you're pushing high ground, even when it comes to pubs. If you push high ground and you fail, reevaluate. Maybe you need to employ a different strategy, one of the ones I'm going to talk about, or this one that they're doing. Maybe you need to get more items. Maybe you need to get an Aegis behind you. They reevaluated. Clearly, they decided that they need an Aegis. I'm not sure why it shows Legion Commander. That is a Chaos Knight. However, he does have an Aegis of the Immortal, and their positioning is actually a lot different this time. So the execution is actually quite flawless from LGD on this high ground push. I do think the first push was a pretty well executed push, other than that one issue which cost them a lot. But with that being said, the supports played well, the Tide played well, the bit of a miscommunication between Storm and Chaos Knight, but if they were a little further apart, they would have played well. In this situation, they don't make the same mistake, and you can actually just go ahead and check out what does occur here. So Tide blinks in, and he's actually doing exactly what he did in the first clip, just playing that big, annoying offlaner beefcake, going in and causing a ruckus on the back lines. So if you're in a pub and you are one of these heroes, or you have one of these heroes, whether it be a Bristleback or an Axe or a Tidehunter, they have to be in that state where it would essentially be just such a waste of time for the enemy team to try and kill them. Tidehunter, he has the Heaven's Halberd, he has a Pipe of Insight, he's a Plate Mail, as well as Kraken Shell, which just makes him innately tanky. So going on this Tide would be a massive waste of time, but he puts himself in a position where he's the only good target to go on. And the reason he's the only good target is because Chaos Knight has an Aegis. So if he gets chronoed, if he gets focused, he's going to respawn, he's going to BKB, and it's basically going to be a 5v5, except newbie's losing, so they can't just win a regular 5v5, especially if they use all of their abilities trying to kill just an Aegis. They're not going to have the resources to fight. The kind of important thing here is what Storm is doing. So same situation, he has a ton of Bloodstone charges, he's super huge. The gold lead isn't that much, although it does look like Storm is really, really scary at the moment. I wouldn't want to be in this game if I was newbie against this Storm, you know, killing everybody and stuff. But with that being said, Storm kind of in the same situation, except instead of standing next to the Chaos Knight hitting the tower, he's occupying his time with something else. He's occupying his time, he's actually about to zip in and just be a little bit annoying on the back lines, but he's playing in a way that if they go on him, it's very unlikely that they're going to go on him, because he's just going to be zipping around and being super annoying, and it would be just him that they get. He has a BKB, he has a cheese. So, once again, kind of same thing as Tidehunter, but the most important thing is he's not occupying his time by hitting that tower as a mid laner, because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to put himself in that position of danger, so he doesn't do it. So you can actually see here what he does. So he zips in, he's being annoying. Actually, this would be a decent chrono here if the Tide and the Storm got chrono together. I do think that would actually be really good. But you can see the Storm immediately zips out and just, you know, he's not going to put himself in that position for very long, despite giving a slight opportunity. There's very little time for a Void to react to that, and you can actually see that he hasn't reacted to it yet. The Chaos Knight pops Phantasm this time, which is good. I definitely think that he needs to put pressure on the enemy team, and if you're a Seizure, you can decide, okay, they can't fight us, I'm going to pop my abilities, whether it be Phantasm, whether it be, you know, popping a Manta style, just using spells, using items to actually siege that tower, because what that's doing is that is essentially forcing newbie into a position where they need to fight, or they're going to lose the buildings. And then the Tidehunter is the only real target that they can go on, because they can't go on the Chaos Knight, they can't go on the Storm. He's zipping around, he's not standing too close to the Chaos Knight near the Void, so the Void can't really get a good angle here. Once again, the supports, beautiful positioning from these two heroes. Actually, one thing that I do want to mention, so you can see this Ancient Apparition has a Force Staff. The first time he had no items, didn't really matter. Positioning should still be the same on the supports. However, it's even more important when you have a Force Staff, whenever you have a Lotus Orb, whenever you have a Solar Crest. Any of these items that are defensive in nature, you need to spread out from your team and just make sure to use these items on your big beefcake who's hitting the tower. You probably don't want to use the items on the idiot who's going in, which the idiot that should be going in. He's doing a good job. I call him an idiot more so because it's kind of an idiotic play style, but it actually works. And offlaners should be doing this if they can. If they can't, if they're too important, and if they can actually kill the offlaner, they shouldn't be doing this, but he knows he can, once again, and it actually turns out really well in this fight. But the supports, standing back, they've got their kind of defensive items, you know, more, the Earth Spirit's more like aggressive defensive because he can blink in and cast spells to save his team afterwards. But the positioning of the supports, once again, beautiful. Except this time the CK and the Storm aren't really in a position where they can get Chrono together. So they essentially just Chrono the Tide because they don't have a choice. They can't go on the Storm, he's zipping around. They can't go on the supports there in the back line. Can't go on the Chaos Knight because he has an Aegis. And it's just a disaster. They don't even kill the Tide. So beautifully played by LGD. Just basically the key word here is discipline. Don't feel tempted to, ooh, we're gonna win the game, guys, let's hit the tower. Don't feel like that, because that's the best way to lose a game of Dota when you're trying to push high ground. So kind of the important thing here is just the positioning of the people in the back line. Make sure that you're separated from everybody. Mainly make sure you're separated from that beefcake who's hitting the tower, which in this case is the Chaos Knight, but it could be an anti-mage, it could be a Spectre, it could be anybody. Even if you're a mid player who does a lot of damage, you're too important to get caught with that hero, and your damage on the tower is rather negligible. So unless you have a massive gold lead, you don't need to do that. Unless you've killed all of them already, you don't need to go hit the tower. Make sure that you're sieging with that, you know, with that one beefcake, everybody else position behind. And the beefcake, your job, if you're the beefcake, is you stand between the enemy team and your team, and you say, hey, come at me, bro. That's your job.